Nobody else. Hello, Pauline. Right. We were expecting a few more people, but because the football's on and everything else, we're just wondering whether we might not get those people. So we will make a start. So welcome, everybody. And here we have Keith, and he is an advanced public health officer at the Norfolk County Council. He's been in public health about 4 years. He joined at the start of the pandemic. Prior to that, he worked in children's services, and several of us might have got these lovely lists that he used to send out with all the details of who was what and where and everything else at that time. So with no further ado, I'll pass over to Keith for you.
Right. Thank you very much, Sarah. And yeah, apologies for actually dragging people out on the night when the England football team were playing. We picked tonight, so we actually avoided the election and before the school holidays kind of like things, and never even thought to check about the football. So
no.
It's on there. Let me share my screen, and hopefully this will work. Is that sharing? Oh, let me press share. That helps, doesn't it? Yeah. That's it. That's better. Yeah, hopefully you can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good. Right. So yeah, I have a few slides to run through, but I'm quite happy to stop and chat about it, and particularly as we're a small group. You know, so if there's any questions, anything you want to ask as we go along, by all means do so. But thank you for coming out tonight anyway. So why are public health interested in neighbourhood planning? Well, it might come as a surprise to you to know that, if my screen will advance, public health actually get consulted on most planning applications. So big developments for new housing estates, nationally significant infrastructure projects, things like the Norwich to Tilbury pylon that's going in or might not be going in from down through South Norfolk. New highways that have been put in, like the Western Link Road around Norwich, say new developments, minerals and waste, even some, so like new quarries that have been built and things like that, or dug, things like that. And we also get consulted on strategic planning policy, so local plans that the district councils have to develop or renew every 5 years, and indeed neighbourhood plans. We're not a statutory consultee, and we don't have any powers, so we can't block plans from going through, but we do like to comment on them, and we do like to try and drive health issues into plans where we can. And the reason behind this is that it's estimated that something like 60% of your health outcomes are actually determined by where it is you actually live. To try and put this into some sort of context for you, so something like 25% of your health is determined by your healthcare system. And that's not just about access to a doctor or a dentist, and we know how hard they are to come by these days, but it's things like if your health records are up to date, if you've got things like vaccination, and if you've been covered for all the different things that we are vaccinated for these days on there. So that's about a quarter of your health outcome. Something like 15% is determined by your genetics, by your biology. So basically the problems that you're actually born with. 10% is decided by your physical environment. So things like particularly, are you warm enough? Are you cold enough? Are you hot enough? Are you dry enough? And those sort of things, the actual, the physical shell around you. But half of your health is actually determined by your social and economic environment. So where you live, where you work, who you live with, and how you mix, sort of things. So, and these are what public health will call the wider determinants of health. And I just wanted to give you some idea about how these things actually affect your health and how they interact with planning. So we have 6 wider determinants of health, and obviously for it makes sense that the built and natural environment is very heavily influenced by planning. But some things like how you're educated, what you earn, where you work, and where you go to work, whether you experience crime or a victim of crime, and what your social capital is, what your network around you is. All these are what we call the wider determinants of health, and all of them, to a greater or lesser extent, are influenced by the planning regime and the planning process. And I just want to dive into these in a little bit more detail, particularly, just jump to the built and natural environment. So this is where planning can really have a big influence on your health. So the first thing we talk about is neighbourhood design. So this is about whether you can actually walk or cycle to the services that you need to go to. So whether that's the shops or your schools, or indeed outdoor spaces, parks and things like that, or sports facilities, grounds on there, and whether you can actually move around your community easily, and whether you can actually get to places you need to be quickly and easily on there. Housing and the type of housing is obviously very, very crucial, and it's been shown that people who, you'll not be surprised to hear this, people who live in good housing are twice as likely to have good health outcomes as people who live in poor quality housing. And the other part about housing is whether you actually own it or rent it. Is it affordable? Can you actually afford to buy it? And once you, or rent it, and once you've done that, do you have enough money left over to spend on the other necessities of life? So affordability of housing is very important. And it's been shown things like, particularly for vulnerable people, for people with disabilities, or people with older age people, actually having access to affordable housing is quite crucial to their mental health and well-being. The food environment is very important for your health. So do people have access to food, to shops supplying good healthy food that's affordable? And it's been shown that there's a good connection between having been able to do things like grow your own food, either in your own garden or at an allotment, or let's say a community orchard. Not only actually provides you with good quality nutritious food, but actually influences people's attitudes towards eating and eating healthily. And on the other hand of it, it's been shown that there's a direct correlation between density of fast food outlets, pizzas and kebabs and things like that, and obesity levels. So we can show that quite clearly. Transport's very important, and it's been shown that things like active transport, and by that we mean the ability to walk or cycle where you need to go, is the simplest way to actually include physical activity in your daily routine. And we know that physical activity has both benefits for your physical health and also your mental health. Now, I appreciate with transport, and particularly things like public transport, that's a strategic issue. And you perhaps think the neighbourhood plans don't have an awful lot of influence in there, but you can still include policies and suggestions and projects within your neighbourhood plan, which actually promotes the use of public transport. And we know how crucial that is with rural communities across Norfolk. So then having a natural and sustainable environment is also crucial. So this is about being able to actually access green spaces. So whether that's being able to actually just see trees from your doors or doorstep or through the windows, or indeed actually having access to large open spaces where people can go to walk and exercise themselves is great. And it actually has a very, very positive benefit on your health. But unfortunately, we find that green spaces are not evenly distributed, and we tend to find that deprived areas have less green space in them. And the other aspect of having a natural and sustainable environment is the impact on climate change. So things like we're experiencing with climate change, hotter summers or more extreme weathers, flooding and things like that. And flooding has been shown to have a very, very detrimental effect on people's mental health. People can suffer with post-traumatic stress syndrome if they've had the house flooded out. So obviously, having access to a natural and sustainable environment is very important. And the other thing about to think about is having sustainable design. So are we able to actually save things like water and energy? And now we actually are then having a positive benefit on climate change and the benefits that they have on as knock-on effects with for our health. So that's very crudely the evidence around the built and natural environment. But I say there are other things which actually can actually affect your health. So it's been shown the better educated you are, then the more likely to have a longer and healthier life. So we're concerned about things we can actually do to improve education. And that's not just the quality of the education that you have in schools, but things like access to school playing fields and outdoor spaces encourages healthy behaviours in children. And we know very well that if we actually encourage or get children to adopt healthy behaviours whilst they're at school, then they're more likely to carry those on throughout their lifetime. Income is very important, and that doesn't come as a surprise to you. But basically, the more money you earn, the more likely you are to live a long and healthy life. But it's not just about income as well. It's not just about the amount of cash you've got in there. Work and being in work has been shown to actually be very, very beneficial for health on the whole. It's not just about actually, as I said, earning money, but it's also about the thought that actually doing something that's worthwhile and the benefit you actually get from doing something that's actually you think is important and worthwhile, and also the social network and the contacts you get through working. And I think we've seen through working from home, although it's become very popular, has actually had a negative effect on people's ability to actually have social interactions on there. So work's very important, and actually having access to good jobs is important. On the other hand, crime and the fear of crime can have a very detrimental effect on people's health. So it's not just about being a victim of crime, where you've actually, suffered the physical attack, if you like, sort of things like, but being afraid and being anxious around crime can actually have a negative impact on your mental health. And not only does it make people feel anxious, it can also actually make people less likely to do things that are physically beneficial for their health. So things like, they won't go out at night because they're frightened of being attacked, and therefore they don't get the physical exercise they need. So fear of crime is very, very important. And within the guide itself, there's actually a link through to the Secured by Design link in there, which actually tells you how to actually design communities which are less likely to be victims of crime. And the final thing, and perhaps this is a bit hard to get on, is social capital is also important. So this is about the network of friends and neighbours and relations that you have close to you that can support you. And that's not just about times when things are good, but it's about having a resource around there when things are not so good. So if you think back to the times of the pandemic and lockdown, and people were isolated and not able to go out, but having that next door neighbour who would just knock on your door and say, "Are you all right? Do you need anything? Have you got your food? Have you got your medicine?" Things like that was a big thing about sustaining people's health and well-being throughout the pandemic. And it's very difficult to actually put how valuable that was and how significant that was about helping people to survive those long lockdown periods. And one fact that always sticks in my mind is that saying that being isolated, being lonely, not having anybody to talk to, has been shown to have the same mortality effect as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. You're better off smoking 15 cigarettes a day and having people to go out with and mix with than being a non-smoker and being isolated on your own. So that's why why planning is so important to health, and why it matters to public health. Now, as I said earlier, we get consulted on neighbourhood plans, and we see some brilliant ones. We see some really actually get this idea on there, but we see some that aren't quite. They tend to be just concentrating on the bricks and mortar, and they don't think about the health implications. But from our point of view, it's it's a little bit soul destroying to start criticizing people's work when they put an awful lot of work into producing a plan and they send it through to us, and we say, oh yeah, but you haven't thought about this, that, and the other. So we've put together what we call the Healthy Neighbourhood Plans Guide, which we're trying to get out to parishes, so that when they start to write a neighbourhood plan, or where they think about actually reviewing their neighbourhood plan, they can read through this guide, and it will give them some ideas about what they might want to do, and what things they might actually want to put into their neighbourhood plan. And one thing I just want to try, if I can work the technology, just to try and show you something around here. Something that people have adapted in plans that we actually like is to include a data profile of facts and figures about the community they live in. And if I can make this work, I'm just going to try and show you a couple of data sources that I think are quite good. So let me just stop sharing there and see if we can actually pick up a different screen, if I'm not being too clever here. Let me share this one. So, and the links to these guides, so links to these data sources are actually in the guide. So don't worry about them, we'll come on to them. Well, this is one I particularly like. So this is the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities local health report. And I'm not going to try and be too clever and move things around here, but I live in West Winch. So down here, this is the ward I live in. So this is the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities local health profile for West Winch. And it includes a lot of information here. So there's information around the population that we have in here. See if it'll move on. Indicators around ethnicity. You'll not be surprised the majority of people in West Winch are white and speak English as their first language. But there's other indicators in here, things like how deprived the ward is, and perhaps this is relevant for a neighbourhood plan particularly, housing and living conditions. So down here we have how many older people are living alone. And just to explain these colour bars, so if it's green, we are better in comparison to England. If it was yellow, we would be the same as England. And if it was red, we would be significantly worse than England. But there's a whole raft of indicators in here which we can include into a neighbourhood plan. And just flick through. So this is one that shows up in here. So this is a red bar. So this shows that we are significantly worse for this particular indicator compared to England. And this is for long-term health conditions and morbidity in West Winch. So we've got slightly more poorly people in West Winch compared to the England average. Now, if you go up here and press the actions button, and I'm not going to, it will actually produce a report. So this is all that data which actually comes out in a paper copy that you can actually print off. So it starts off with a map of the ward and takes you through all those indicators, which is a little bit getting used to actually using the device. But once you get there, there's an awful lot of information that you can actually put into your neighbourhood plan if you wish to do so. The other data, sorry,
Keith.
Go on, John.
One question: is that by ward or is that by parish?
That's by ward. That's by ward.
Right. Okay. Because I mean, where I am, we're in Wickerwood ward.
Yeah.
But we're obviously there's two parishes within the same ward, essentially. Or
right.
Number of parishes. So.
Well, I might have a solution for you. So the other one I particularly like is this one, which is the Office for National Statistics census site. And this is the data for 2021. So it's really up-to-date data. And for here, you can actually go down to parish. So I live in Middleton, just outside of King's Lynn, and this is Middleton Parish. And there's a whole list of indicators that you can actually click on here. So we can actually start to build a profile, as I call it. So we can add on accommodation type. So you'll not be surprised to know that 98.9% of us live in either a whole house or a bungalow. But you can add in age profile. You can add in whether people have got central heating. You can add in whether people are disabled. And there's a whole raft here of, I think there's 28 indicators altogether, some of which are relevant, some which might not be. You can build these things up. I wonder if I can say occupation. So you can have a look at what people do for a living who live in Middleton. So it's on there. I haven't found a way yet of actually how you can download this data at the moment, unfortunately. So it's a question of actually going through it item by item and actually downloading the information, then creating your own graph from it. But I haven't had a chance to play about with it too much on there. But I think it's a great way if you want to actually try and find out some data about your parish particularly. So let me stop sharing and see if I can actually get back to my original presentation. If I can find the right one. This one. And share. Yeah. So the links are in the guide to these data profiles. They're in there, and I think I've sent a copy of the guide to Sarah. I will send you another copy, Sarah, and I'll send you the slides as well to make sure you've got these. Yeah. But yeah, so there are other data sources in there. This Norfolk Insight one is Norfolk County Council's own data library. I must admit, I find it a little bit clunky and a little bit difficult to actually use, but if you do persist with it and do get down to it, that will produce information by parish and even down to lower super output areas, so you can get some really detailed information on that. But that's just to give you a reason why public health are actually interested in health, but what we like you to do about it. So if I can just click on to my next one. So when public health look at any plan that's been put into us, whether it's a national significant infrastructure plan or a 50 housing development, we carry out what we call a health impact assessment checklist on there, and it is literally a box ticking exercise that we would go through, and we would like to be able to do this with neighbourhood plans, but quite frankly we don't have the time and the resources to do this, and it would be better if you could actually sort of like think about these themes yourselves when you're writing this, when you're drafting your neighbourhood plan. So just to take a bit of a side step as well, we have what we call a health in planning protocol, which is agreed with the local planning authorities, so with all the district councils and the Boroughs Authority, and that includes a health impact assessment checklist in it. So if you do follow this format, hopefully the district councils will actually recognise that you're actually following this theme, and they'll recognise them there. But there are 6 themes, and I'm just going to actually refer to my notes because I never remember all the details around here about what we're looking for when we're assessing how healthy a plan is. So number 1 is partnership and inclusion. So has the plan been written and developed in collaboration and communication with the residents, and particularly with people who are hard to reach, or perhaps people who are disabled, or vulnerable groups have actually been included in the development of the plan. So does the plan create a healthy environment, and by that does construction minimize air pollution and noise, and use sustainable energy and materials, and enhances biodiversity, promotes local food growing, minimizes flood risk, and minimizes overheating? So that's the basic elements of building on there. But does a plan create vibrant neighbourhoods? So by that we mean it promotes new social infrastructure and access to community facilities and public services, access to fresh fruit shops, and tries to actually avoid the over concentration of reliance on fast food takeaways type things on there. So does the plan promote active lifestyles? So does it provide access to open spaces and green spaces, such things as sports facilities and allotments? And do plans actually include a travel plan which will actually help to try and promote active travel? And by that we mean walking and cycling. Does the planning promote healthy housing? So we're talking about houses with adequate internal living spaces, and if possible garden spaces. Buildings promote the use of stairs, Housing meets minimum national standards, as you'd expect, and houses. There are houses which actually will accommodate older people and people with disabilities. But there's a mix of affordable types of housing in there, and both for ownership and for rent. And finally, does the plan promote economic activity? So is the chance for people to work, or can they actually get to work easily using sustainable means of transport on there? So the guide sets out these 6 themes on there, but I appreciate that's very difficult to take in there. So the guide also actually, and we're just going to try and risk sharing again to actually show you the guide itself. If I can find the right one again. Share again and pick this up. So this is the actual guide itself, and it has all the, let me take it back to the start. It has down here all the evidence. There's how to use it on there. This is the planning policy behind the guide and national and neighbourhood planning guides on there. This talks about the wider determinants of health. I'll skip over the map on there. This is all the evidence around there about the wider determinants of health I was talking about earlier. So how housing, how food, environment affects you, how transport affects your health, education, income, etc. We're going through here. But this is the healthy planning checklist and themes. So this is those same 6 themes again. So partnership, inclusion. But where we've come across what we think is a good example of how this is being used, we've got the example in there. You I'm not saying just take this verbatim and just lift it up and put it into your own plan. But the idea is you can actually go away and actually have a look at how somebody's actually developed one of these policies and how it meets one of these themes. And there isn't an example for everyone, but there are some good ones in here. So, so like we really liked the one that the Pouring Lang neighbourhood plan did around their natural environment policy. So that's included as an example in there. And that's really what the guide is. Now, we're keen to stress that neighbourhood plan, it's your community's plan. We're not trying to tell you what to put in there. We're just trying to offer this guide up to say there's some sources of information that you might wish to think about when you're writing your plan or reviewing your plan, to think, have we thought about that? And have we included this? And, it's really trying to get you to think about it. So say we're not trying to tell you how to write your plan, but we're hoping this will actually help you think about how you can influence the health of your residents by producing your neighbourhood plan. And I think I'm just going to stop there. I will say a thank you very much. I'll take the opportunity when I get down to the end of it to say thank you to the Town and Country Planning Association, to Broadland Council and to South Norfolk District Council, who helped in the preparation of the guide. And I will stop sharing there, and I will happily take any questions.
Can't find it on the website. I was just obviously Googling Norfolk County Council. I put in health and neighbourhood plans. Hasn't come up with it. Yeah,
we're trying to get it on there. I'm in the last stages of it, while web designers insist on it being accessible in nature, to be able to read on there. And we're just trying to polish the final things, and I'm hoping to get it sorted in the next couple of weeks and get it up onto the Norfolk County Council website. Where some of the district councils aren't quite so touchy about these things, and they've taken it on. So there is on certainly on Breckland District Council's website and on Kingsland and West Norfolk Borough Council website. Okay. But I'll send a copy of this across to Sarah, so she's got it and she can distribute it out on there. Say what the argument about is that we have that infographic on there, and they don't like the fact that there's curve writing on it. So we're just trying to actually sort out the final details on there, and we'll get it published. But I didn't want to hang about just keeping it out for that same thing on there. But
you mentioned some good plans, and I've written down Pouring Land, Harleston and Filby, which I just glanced when you're going through. Are there any others you'd recommend we look at?
There's several examples in here. So let me risk sharing again. I try and push my luck here. I got the same one. I'm doing well here. No. Yeah, let me go. No, I don't want that. Beg your pardon. I thought I was being too clever there. Find the right one again. Yeah, got the right one. So yes, so I'll Pauline, I'll go through these steadily if you wish, but I say I wouldn't. They're in the guide, so don't worry, too much about it if you don't catch them.
We're just about to renew ours. Ours is 10 years old. We're just about doing it
right. Yes.
in April.
Yeah.
And so we're just looking to see, because it was quite early days, things have changed a lot in 10 years, and I wanted to be able to read as many other people's plans as possible.
Yeah, and some of these are quite recent plans. So these are 2021 for the pouring land one, local food growing. So this is Columpton neighbourhood plan. This is outside of Norfolk, but it's a policy around community allotments, orchard and composting. So it's their 2020 to 23 plan. Flood list, this is Harsel Town Council's 2021, their policy around climate change and flood risk. So this is Vibrant Neighbourhood, and this is Swanton Morley's neighbourhood plan for 2019 and additional community facilities. So I'm not saying these are actually perfect and give you all your answers on there, but they give you some ideas about what to think about and where to look on there. Because sometimes it's difficult to start from scratch and think of these things, but if you've got an example you can look at, you can sort of like pinch the ideas.
Newmarket, right?
Yeah. I mean, I love this one. This is Newmarket, but neighbourhood plan. But they were actually got we're talking about access to fresh food, and they got a plan to actually have a twice weekly market in the town centre. To actually get back to fresh produce being sold through a market again. It's a wonderful idea. So yeah, that's the things on there. So there isn't an example for every particular instance, but there's a lot of them in there. Yeah. The Holt Town Green Wheel idea about having it showing a network of footpaths in and around the town was seen to be on there. So yeah,
they have their owl trail, don't they, that you can do?
Yes. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can go onto each district council website and look up neighbourhood plans and click on them. I just thought, well, if you've got a few just to mention, then I'll start with those.
And the links are on there, so when you actually get the guide and you have a look in there, and hopefully the hyperlinks will work, so you can just actually click on the the whole neighbourhood plan, and it'll actually take you through there. So it'll bounce you through quite quickly.
Do you think things are going? We obviously get government the downloads every day with what's happened and everything.
Yeah.
And obviously, first day I think was changing to the planning framework and everything else.
And I was a local plan meeting today for one of the district councils, and that's obviously got them very what should I say, interested about, and they're quite, it's very easy to actually bring back in mandatory planning targets for a number of houses to be built, but the actual practicalities of actually how are you going to do that, given the constraints of biodiversity net gain and nutrient neutrality, and community infrastructure levy and things like that. The developers just, they've still got to make a profit out of doing these things, haven't they? So, you can't just keep loading costs onto them and expect them to say, oh yeah, we'll go and build you 1,000 houses. So things on there. So I think the district councils are adopting a wait and see policy. They've seen the policy announcement on Friday or whatever it was about, the mandatory housing targets, but I think that they're waiting to see what the detail is going to be about how they're actually going to solve that.
Yeah, we'll be able to go into the finer detail, will we? But as I say, we've obviously our president is Tim O'Riordan, and he's obviously very keen on green things and everything else. And there is developers out there that have been doing zero carbon building for some time. Never been adopted, never been sort of the bloke's very successful. Obviously, it's their profit in it and everything else.
Yes.
Homes have been good and lasted and everything else. But nobody's actually sort of tried to tap into that technology to do anything or do themselves. He's just been isolated, really, which frustrates Tim in lots of ways that the council are the districts haven't put more of a the biodiversity and everything else within the planning, within their local plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a phrase that I'd heard the other day, and I should have written it down because I didn't actually catch it, but it was like justifiable contradictions in there, in that you want to try and do good, but there's a trade-off about the impact that has. So we want new developers to build new developments, but then we ask them to contribute towards the schools and the GP surgeries, and that add costs into the system, so they then can't afford to it, and it's no longer viable as a development, kind of like things on there. So everything's a constant trade-off about trying to do the right thing, but obviously it has a knock-on effect against other things, and there's a consequence to your decisions that's made. So it's not easy. It's not easy. No, it's difficult for everybody.
But we always think about the houses we've got to build, but we never ever think first of the infrastructure, do we?
And we've got to build the roads and the schools and the GP surgery, so you can actually get to it and things like that. But the demand is there. We know, there's down there. And to be honest with you, new build is only one of my concerns. I think the other thing that worries me, particularly in Norfolk, is we've got such an old housing stock, and we've got houses that were built. I think, I can't remember the figures, but something like half of them were built before the Second World War, just to building standards which are are no longer applicable. And certainly living in a cold, damp home that you cannot afford to heat has a massive impact on your health and well-being. And we've got lots and lots of houses in that sort of state in Norfolk, and it's a quandary about how we're actually going to get around and fix it, because we're talking about somewhere between £30,000 and £60,000 to do a really good retrofit on a job to fetch some to bring a house up to decent home standards. Well, who's got that kind of money, so whether it's your owner occupier or somebody to actually give you the grants or things like that, it's a hell of a challenge.
Living in a grade 2 listed money pit, I know about it well.
With oil heating.
Yes, oil heating.
Rattly windows.
Well, we had all our windows replaced, but where we were talking about, I think we spent about 50-something odd thousand on them to get them replaced in the end. We have to have sash windows and wood and everything else. We did doors this year, and everything else. But the only reason the house is listed is because of the front door that doesn't open. I think it's because it was a cottage that was owned by Gayton Hall. Basically, I mean, Gayton is in Gayton Hall, and I think they took revenge on people, didn't they? And so a lot of things listed. And we've got a lot of places that are around us that are just as old and probably got just as amount of features and stuff, but they're not listed at all. So it does feel a bit surprising in some respect, but
it doesn't make any sense, does it really?
No, it doesn't. But trying to dereg things is criminal, apparently. So
well, it's these things might change. You don't know, because I say we have to try and we can't make people live in cold, drafty homes, can we? We're just going to make them ill. So.
Well, it's lovely and cool in the summer, and
2 days a year. 2 days a year, I'm smug. Here I'm in my thick jumper.
Oh, I went off to do Eastern last night, and I got to Dareham, and I literally thought I was actually riding down a river. I thought I was in a canoe more than I was in. The windscreen wipers were full pelt and still not really clean, and it was down to 30 miles an hour, and it was just torrential coming down. And you just think, this is July, come on, folks.
But it's July in England and it's Wimbledon week, so.
And then I had an SLCC meeting this morning, and Gina, you might not know Gina. Gina's in Portugal at 35 and complaining about the heat, and we say, either send it over this way or stop complaining, one or the other.
Keith, one of the problems with all these things, the neighbourhood plans, is that there's no money. I mean, we can put in that we want to improve social capital, we want to have vibrant neighbourhoods, but there's no actual money coming our way. I mean, I think it's very unlikely. I mean, there might be a new scheme. I remember last time there was a Labour government. We got funding for affordable transport or something and schools. But, you know, generally, you know, you want us to put nice things in our neighbourhood plan. I'm aware that our last neighbourhood plan ended up being a bit woolly. We put in nice things like the parish council supports access to footpaths and we support the schools. Well, we do, but nothing happened. We had no money arrived because of those statements, and nor in the end did we do anything. Could we do anything? Because we don't look after paths and we don't look after schools. So I think perhaps it's the way we were led by the time by the planners that we end up with a whole lot of sort of platitudes.
Your neighbourhood plans do have influence, and they are required by law to actually take notice of what your requirements are. So I know sometimes it can feel like it's you're on a hiding to nothing because you can put these wishes and desires in there, and you don't sometimes get them. But if you don't ask, you certainly won't get them. So they do actually have to pay pay attention to what actually your wants and desires are. And it can perhaps steer the developers into delivering some of these things along there, so they can do Section 106 agreements and community infrastructure levy to try and actually make sure that if there is any new development, it does actually come as a benefit to you. But yeah, no, I totally appreciate where you're coming from. That it's one thing to have these wants and desires, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's got to be paid for somehow.
I mean, we could list all the things I've typed down when you've been talking, improving walking and cycling. I mean, I live in a village, there's no way I would cycle into Acle because the roads are too narrow and they feel dangerous. So there's not going to be any funding for a cycle path.
Yeah, and that's interesting actually, because I was at a webinar a couple of months ago, which was run by Professor Chris Whitty. Remember from the pandemic, and his idea about actually promoting active travel and walking and cycling. And one of the points he made was, don't assume just because people live in the countryside they can get out and walk. There's no way people are going to walk down a road if there's no pavement there, and there's a Chelsea tractor coming the other way at 60 miles an hour. So there is people are recognizing these things and shouting about these things. Whether it actually comes to anything or not, I don't know. But yeah, it was interesting that Professor Whitty, remarked on this point, that particular point about it, that it's not safe to walk in the countryside because there isn't a pavement.
No. No, sometimes we see kids who've obviously missed the last bus home and they're walking along the road in the dark, in the winter, in a black coat. If you're, and you think, oh God, that's just not right, is it? But
yeah. And then we end up using people, using their cars to drive the kids about, and we're trying to discourage people from using cars because of the impact they have on air pollution and things like that. So yeah,
So what I suppose I'm looking at Sarah as well, really, is that as neighbourhood plans come through, we sort of need be very helpful if the association could gather together really dynamic policies as opposed to these general, we support better access to footpaths. If some council comes up with a really good idea or finds some funding pot that we can get, that would be really helpful.
We always send anything that we get through for funding or work that we hear about, that we always send through, and we always put them in the newsletters and everything else.
But just keep an ear out, Sarah, as things move on, especially with the changes to planning, if people come up with a really good idea, because I'm all about plagiarism myself. If it's a good idea and it works, then, great as a starting point.
Yeah, certainly will. We obviously don't know what's going to happen now and what's going to come out. And there might be, never know, there might actually be a skeleton plan that makes it easier that people can fill in the blanks and do things and do things that way, which I think is there's a lot that are using consultants now that are actually paying over to get them done and get them done quickly and get them through. But the grant doesn't cover, obviously, the cost of having a consultant to do it.
No, it did do when we first did it, but it probably doesn't now, no.
No, they're roughly taking about £20,000 a consultant to get stuff through. And your grant is 10, isn't it? They have put it up a little bit, so it's 10 now. But if you need a housing needs survey, they'll give you a bit more. And if you've got other deprived areas and need other surveys and stuff, there's extras you can add on. But obviously, to do the work on those extras costs more money anyway. So, yeah.
I mean, I'd like, in my village, I'd like one of those shared car schemes. When my daughter lived in London, you know, they didn't have a car because nowhere to park, and there was a car at the end of every sort of road that you could pre-book and get into with your credit card or whatever. And I mean, place somewhere like Upton, everyone has to have 2 cars so that you can both get out. If, you know, if one of them's working, you can get a car
Yes.
because it's got to go to the shops. And actually, you don't need 2 cars 90% of the time.
No.
That'd be really good in Norfolk villages if you just had a car or 2 per village that you could pre-book.
A community car. Yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
That's what I like.
I think, I don't know whether you were at one of our seminars, but we had John Fagan, who obviously scribe, but he's into other things as well. He's obviously into transport, and he was saying, I think it was in India or whatever, that you actually put your schedule in for a day of where you need to be for your meetings or whatever, and you upload it to like an Uber site, and hey, presto, you come out of your meeting, you walk outside the building, your car's there ready to take you to your next appointment. And he was saying, like, they'll work out the routes so that if there's several people, they'll try and fill the whole car. So obviously they are sharing. But he felt that if we managed to get there, that going further down in future, we wouldn't need cars. There would only be these cars that we
Shuttles, sort of shuttles. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's because the lack of public transport in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Our last bus comes through at 5 o'clock. If you're at work,
We've got one a day. It goes from Acle to Wroxham and back. So you can go shopping in Wroxham and back, but you can't do anything else.
Yeah.
So it doesn't help you work. It doesn't get you to school. I mean, there are school buses, but you know.
But yeah, if you're a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old and you just left school and you're looking for your first job, how do you get there? Yeah. And
I mean, back in the day, there were these scooters you could hire through some charity.
yes, Kickstart
Getting
was
to
still
work.
doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think they're still going, actually. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was
that's still
Kickstart,
going.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Trouble is, the roads where we live, there've been so many people killed.
I wouldn't want to drive a scooter.
We wouldn't want children on a scooter there, so
No.
down to the taxi and mum and dad now, isn't it?
Yeah. But if we're not careful, we're going to depopulate our rural areas, and it's only going to, young people are going to, and young people are moving into the cities and away from the rural villages, and again, public health are seriously concerned about the aging population of Norfolk. We're getting a lot older people who obviously have higher health needs, and if you're stuck out in the back of beyond and you are no longer able to drive, then it's then starting to put pressure on social care and things like that, things on there. So it is an issue.
Yeah, the community car schemes are very well used. And because obviously people are now going further and further for treatment now. So when you were just going backwards and forwards to King's Lynn or to the doctors or whatever, now you're going to Addenbrooke's and probably into London even. That the community car schemes are taking people. But they rely on volunteers, and they're always short of volunteers, drivers and everything else. So yeah, and unfortunately we haven't, people that are volunteering, I think we had a cut down after lockdown, because I thought a lot of people felt that they still had time to do their bucket list.
Yeah,
they would probably be okay. I'll sit on the parish council for another 4 years, and then I've got my bucket list done and everything else. And then I think people realised with the pandemic that they better do it now, because they might not do it. And I think that sort of changed the how people thought about volunteering. And I know that I've done several things on volunteering lately that there's a shortages. Been working with South Norfolk on a campaign to try and get more counsellors in. They're doing videos and they produce leaflets and everything else. But just have to wait and see how it goes.
Yeah, I know Norfolk County Council had volunteering week a few weeks ago, didn't they? Try and actually boost the volunteers. So yeah.
Right. Anybody got any more questions or anything that they need to ask? Obviously, I'm sure if you think of something, later on, if you want to email me, then I can email Keith and we can get the answer or whatever back to you.
Yeah.
And obviously we've got all the information, the material now, and so we'll be sending that out to you.
Yeah.
And everything, and this will obviously go on the YouTube channel, so then anybody who has watched the football and not joined us this evening that should have done, they can watch it on catch up as such.
Well, I hope they won anyway. So
Well, fingers crossed, but yeah, there's always tender hooks, isn't it, lately? There doesn't seem to be many goals and lots of penalties. But yeah. Right, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for your evening. Thank you, Keith, for a brilliant talk, and it's made me think about things in a different light. Some things that you don't normally think about that you think, yeah, we should be taking those into consideration more. So bid you farewell and a good evening for the rest of it. And the sun's shining here in this part of Norfolk, so long
Lovely.
way to continue.
Thanks.
thank you very much, Sarah.
Okay.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, John. Nice to meet you both.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye,
It
John.
was
now.
perfect
Bye.
timing. Just in time for the match to start.
Oh, is it just starting, is it? All right.
Doesn't start till 8 o'clock, so I was glad that this meeting didn't run over an hour. It's just
Ah.
worked out perfectly.
Oh, that's good then. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
thank
Bye
you,
now.
everyone.
Bye.
John. Thanks.
Right. Okay.